Welcome back, and as you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day to get some of that dirty YouTube money so I can afford to provide you folks in-person, hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. We have a class coming up on AI and web scraping next week. We have a class coming up on extending AI capabilities using REST APIs in a few more weeks, and we are going to keep having classes. If you're interested, take a look at the schedule at silicondojo.com. Do remember they are all in person. So please don't RSVP if you're in Kenya or something. Anyways, do remember free to the end user is not actually free. That's why I shake my brain nips every day. If you want to throw some money into the donor box link down below, that would be ever so lovely. And so, OpenAI is burning so much money. OpenAI is just burning all of the money. What I think is interesting about this particular story is that it does show that there might be a route to profitability for AI companies, these LLM companies, but OpenAI might not be on that particular road. It might not be on the road. I think that's one of the fascinating things to see in the technology world. Like one of the things I've talked about before, right, is there's the technology itself, right? You know, TCP/IP is a technology. Relational databases are a technology. HTTP is a technology. And then there is the product, right? The web browser, whether you use Safari or Chrome or Firefox, right? That's the product itself. And then there is the company behind it, right? So Apple owns Safari. Google owns Chrome, and Mozilla owns Firefox, right? So those companies are doing very differently. And so that's one of the interesting things to see in the technology world is sometimes, you know, winning amazing technologies simply they don't end up being put into products for whatever reason. Or good products fail in the marketplace for whatever reason. Or companies with good products and good technology. The company itself, you know, fails. You look at Netscape back in the day, right? Remember, back in the 90s, you had to pay $40 for a license for Netscape Navigator, right? If you wanted to get on the World Wide Web in the 90s, you had to drop $40, which is probably like $80 to $100 today. And they had a really good business going all the way until Microsoft came up with Internet Explorer and gave it away for free. That killed their business, right? They had a good technology, they had a good product, and they had a good business right up until Bill Gates did what Bill Gates always did, right? And so that's one of the curious things to see. And so that's one of the things with what's going on with artificial intelligence now. One of the big questions is not necessarily the technology, right? I'm not actually that snarky on the technology itself. I mean, the technology is the technology. I'm snarky on the bros, right? The silicon bros out there, the tech bros out there that keep mansplaining shit to me. I'm like snarky about those dumb fucks. But the technology itself is fun. Technology itself is really good. I'm curious, the question is what products will it be put into, right? I've seen a lot of AI being put into products that I use on a daily basis, and it literally makes the products worse. It's not even simply that oh, I'm an old school Luddite and I don't want AI. It's even when I use AI, the AI product is broken. It's literally less functional than a basic search routine, right? And so it's curious to see how the products fail. Like so the technology is good, but you put it into a product in a shitty way, it's going to be shitty. And the next curious thing to be thinking about is all these tech companies, right? So that's one of the questions I have with OpenAI's valuation at like $500 billion is that when you have companies like Meta, right? So you have Mark Zuckerberg come out and they have their Llama model. It's not open source, it's some other weird type of thing. But anyways, they have a very good model out there that you can just use for free. And so when you have one tech company giving away a product for free that costs you billions and billions and billions of dollars to create, and you're trying to sell the product, that becomes a very difficult proposition. I think that's one of the interesting things to look at with a lot of these AI companies is look at the businesses that they're trying to go for. One of the curious things, when I've talked with Meta employees, I've talked with current Meta employees, I've talked with previous Meta employees, and one of the things I ask them is like, hey, you don't have to tell me. Look, I understand you might have non-disclosure agreements or whatever else, so you do not have to tell me any specifics. Just tell me, is there a plan to make AI a profit center at Meta? right? Because Mark Zuckerberg has come out and literally said he wants Meta to be the premier AI company. And now, look, I understand, right? They do communications, they do a lot of things. Should they have a significant investment in artificial intelligence? Absolutely, no questions there. But why do they need to be like a premier company in it? And literally, and I've talked with Meta and previous Meta employees, like, look, you don't have to say specifics. Just, is there a plan? Blink twice if there's a plan to turn this into a profit center. And literally the answer that I've received across the board is, well, it may not be a profit center now, but if AGI is the most valuable product to ever be invented, then Meta wants to invest into AGI now so that they can get the value later. Like, ooh, Boise's. Ooh, wow. Okay, that's how it goes, right? And so again, that's one of the interesting things to look at with the AI business landscape is just how weird it is. And that's before you even get into China, right? So one of the interesting things with China, what's curious, is you think about like competitive advantage and the competitive arena that companies are dealing with. So one of the big things with China is the whole argument that they will not be able to get their hands on the top flight hardware, right? The idea is that NVIDIA hardware and some of this other hardware and technology, they simply will not get their hands on. So what is one of the ways that they can have a competitive advantage? And so one of the competitive advantages for China is simply pure execution, right? In the Western world, there's this real idea of ownership of ideas, right? And then extracting value because you have a monopoly on the idea. One of the things in China is fuck ownership of the idea. Who can execute, right? The value is in the execution. So a lot of the AI products coming out of China are completely fucking open source. So the idea is hey, in order to make China more significant in the AI realm, all these products that get created, they're just simply going to be open source. They're going to be put out on the open market so that other Chinese companies can just simply execute on those products that have been created, right? It gets put out on the open market. Other people can download it. You can download the models too. And so we're in this very weird world for these AI businesses where, again, there's a difference between like the intrinsic value of a thing and the economic value of a thing, right? Capitalism. Where's the book? I always bring this down. So the MAGA people can scream at me. Yes, I in fact have Marx on my shelf. I think I read half of this. It's a big fucking book. It's a big book. Anyways, Capital, Volume 1. Anyways, one of the things that Marx talks about in here is the difference between the values of a thing, like the commodity value of a thing and all that kind of thing. And that's one of the interesting things. Again, what is the actual value of a thing? Like with Silicon Dojo. Like what's really interesting for me with Silicon Dojo, right? I go to Durham, North Carolina every couple of weeks. I teach these classes. We have pretty full classes. And the reality is I basically lose money on that proposition. By any stretch of the imagination, providing technology education for people to empower themselves is intrinsically valuable. It's just not economically valuable, right? Literally. The reason I do these videos is because this has the economic value to pay for the thing that has the intrinsic value. And that's one of the things that I wonder about with this whole AI space is not that AI isn't paradigm shifting and the rest of it. Again, it's not AI, it's LLMs or whatever, but whatever. Not that this technology isn't paradigm shifting and world changing the rest of it, but it doesn't mean it necessarily has the economic value people think it does. Right? Again, think about that with Netscape Navigator and the web browser, right? That was making the company Netscape just so much money all the way up until Microsoft gave away the product for free, right? Web browsers changed the world. The world is fundamentally different today than it was in 1995 because of web browsers. But web browsers, you just expect to exist, right? They're either built directly into your operating system now, or you can download them for free. The thought of you spending $50 on a web browser is idiotic, right? It's idiotic on the face of it. Why would I ever spend money on a web browser? But think about how intrinsically valuable web browsers are, but there's no real financial value in them, right? Anyway, so this is interesting from Oh, I think it's Gizmodo. OpenAI will lose $74 billion the same year that Anthropic breaks even, says a report. And so this is going to be an interesting thing to be looking at with these AI companies. The AI companies that seem like they are winning today may go down in flames tomorrow. Do remember, iPhone was not the first smartphone. Blackberries they weren't even smartphones. They were just Blackberries, right? Blackberries were Blackberries for a decade until the iPhone came in and just fucking crushed them, right? And so that's an interesting thing to be thinking about too with a lot of this stuff is who will win this particular race. And they might win the race by not over-investing. OpenAI has committed more than $1.4 trillion to building out its data center infrastructure in the next 8 years. It's projected to lose $74 billion in 2028 alone, according to a new report from the Wall Street Journal, citing internal documents from the company. On the opposite end of the spectrum, AI startup Anthropic is chugging along with a fraction of the hype that Sam Altman's company enjoys, and it will reportedly manage to break even that same year. So think about that. You do not hear about Anthropic nearly as much as you hear about OpenAI. And you know OpenAI's CEO is Sam Altman. And I can't tell you who Anthropic's CEO is. I know the name every once in a while. Like, I'll see the name. I'll be like, oh, that's the CEO of Anthropic. I don't fucking know the CEO of Anthropic. What did the CEO of Anthropic say yesterday? I don't know. I don't know, right? But think about this, right? So you have this one person like really up there in the zeitgeist or whatever constantly, and they are burning money. Another company is considered less impressive, right? OpenAI is worth $500 billion, Anthropic's worth $200 billion, the whole 9 yards. But it looks like they may actually get to profitability while OpenAI is literally burning cash. The documents seem to suggest very different paths to profitability for the companies. Anthropic, which most recently raised money from its investors at a nearly $200 billion valuation, has quietly been building up a subscriber base of corporate customers. According to a report from a Wall Street Journal earlier this month, about 80% of Anthropic's revenue comes from business clients, which honestly makes sense. Right? When you go out there and you talk with people, when you talk with normal people, right? When you talk with technology professionals, they're probably using Claude Code. Everybody seems to love Claude Code. Not a lot of snark there. On the other hand, when you're talking to normies, they use ChatGPT. But it is interesting. Think about the different customers, and then think about the different value you get out of those types of customers. Let's see here. Of which it is over 300,000 customers. OpenAI claims to have about 1 million enterprise subscribers and more than 7 million total ChatGPT for work seats. But according to the journal's reporting, OpenAI's margins on those subscriptions are much smaller than those of Anthropic. I do think that's an interesting thing too. Again, with OpenAI pushing all these frontier models, they take a lot of money to train. They take a lot of hardware and the rest of it. One of the questions that I brought up with this whole LLM rat race is, do you really need the best? Like, in order to solve problems, let's imagine for a second as technology professionals that we get paid to solve problems. That's it. I'm going to use the technology simply to solve a problem. Do I really need the frontier model? Seriously, do I need the frontier model? Does the frontier model practically give me anything of value? And I think for a lot of things, with a lot of these AIs and these LLMs and the rest of it, is you don't. It's not simply that you don't need the frontier model. You don't necessarily even need a particularly quote-unquote good model. So if Anthropic is more focused on actually providing value to its customers, and so therefore it only uses the resources required in order to provide value, they can start eking out more revenue and potentially more profit versus OpenAI that's constantly going off for this general intelligence horse crap, right? Which again, I have a big question about. Why, like literally just fundamentally, why do we need AGI? The more functionality you give to a system, the more resources it's gonna burn. Right? That's just the truth of it. So why do I want this general intelligence running my dishwasher or my car or anything else? The reality is I want a more efficient, narrow intelligence to do specifically what it is I need to do. But anyways, Let's see here. One would think, given that, OpenAI might be spending its funding frugally until it figures out a clear path to profitability. Instead, the company is going all out on building out data centers and scooping up chips to train and power its models. It's also straight up burning cash with the strategy of just getting people hooked to its ecosystem in hopes that they can eventually be monetized. Earlier this week, Forbes reported that Sora 2, the company's video generation model, it blew up with millions of people creating 10-second clips, cost the company about $15 million per day, which works out to an annualized rate of $5 billion. So they are literally funding you creating those Sora clips to the tune of $5 billion on an annualized basis. It's not clear that the path is really there for OpenAI, but it sure seems to think it's viable. Per the Wall Street Journal, the company's own internal documents show a rapidly growing revenue base that will lead to the company turning a profit by 2030. On its way to finally eking into the black on its bottom line, it'll reportedly burn about 14 times as much money as Anthropic. The problem for Anthropic and any other company operating in the AI space is that OpenAI just might take everyone down with it. The company's financial commitments tie it tightly to lots of players that are key to the AI sector, and its failure would result in a pretty major domino effect. And so that's the other weird thing going on with this whole AI deal, right? So basically, by 2028, Anthropic basically should get into the black. So Anthropic should get into the black in 2028 while OpenAI is still burning cash. The concept being with OpenAI is they believe they will get into the black by 2030. 2030 is over 4 years away. And so basically they have to keep pumping the AI hype cycle for damn near half a decade. And I have some real questions for that. And so it will be interesting to see these different businesses and how they go about trying to get to profitability. And one of the things for you to realize is that in reality, right, you don't have to provide the best. You have to provide what's good enough for your customers to want to purchase, and then be able to provide that with as few resources as possible so that you can actually get out profitability. What we might find out is the Anthropics of the world, or the DeepSeeks of the world, or maybe the Mistrals of the world are actually playing a much smarter game than OpenAI does. It is an interesting question, though, that they come to at the end of this with the whole idea: if OpenAI crashes and burns, when OpenAI burns in, they are so incestually connected to so many other companies in this ecosystem that if they fail, right, if they get digital HIV, it means everybody else is gonna die horrible deaths too. So that's the thing. Like, what if you're part of a group? What if you're part of a community and you are not part of the incestual orgy, right? But maybe you live in the same house, right? You went to San Francisco. You just needed a room to live in, and you go in, you get the room. You're doing your work. You're going about your thing, and you're not part of the incestual orgy that is going on with everybody else in the house. The problem is you're out of that. You're out of that. So, right, when somebody comes in with some kind of digital HIV, you are not going to get the digital HIV because you are staying away from that incestuous orgy going on. The problem is everybody that's part of that incestuous orgy, they are going to get the digital HIV, and then all of your roommates are going to die. And then you're going to be in a house alone. And then what happens to you then? What happens to you then? And I think that's one of the big problems that we're currently seeing is what's currently going on with this AI cycle is that if OpenAI fails, it is just going to take so much down with it. And I've talked about that, where it's not even just simply the AI companies. It's not simply just NVIDIA or whatever else. You have the electric utilities, right? All of these utility companies are trying to upgrade in order to support data centers that probably do not need to be there. You have construction companies, right? Laying cement, building buildings for data centers that probably do not need to be there. Right, all kinds of economic activity. They literally say we had like a 1.5% growth in GDP last year. They're saying, or this year, I guess, they're saying that all of that GDP growth is simply from this AI idiocy. So if you take the AI idiocy away, for a country the size of the United States, you're looking at a decrease of 1% of GDP. That damages everybody. So anyways, it'll be curious to see how this fleshes out at the end of the day. It is important to remember, as a technology professional, that there is the technology, right? There's TCP/IP, there's RTMP, SMTP, that kind of stuff, right? There's the product itself, web servers, web browsers, network switches, the whole 9 yards. And then there are the companies, right? Microsoft, Cisco, Mistral, Anthropic. These are all different things. You can have a good company that creates a shit product. You can have a good company that creates a good product, and then another company gives away the version of the product for free and screws them, right? You can have an amazing technology that just nobody figures out how to turn into a viable product, that type of deal. So that's a very important thing. That's where, a lot of people talk about that with Bitcoin. It's like, well, blockchain is the future. I haven't heard that for a while. Isn't it funny how we haven't heard that for a while? Anyways, the idea is that blockchain is the future for some fucking reason. And ergo, you have to invest in Bitcoin. And you're like, but that's not the same thing. That would be like saying the NoSQL databases are the future, and therefore you have to invest in Twitter. And again, Twitter uses NoSQL, but that's one thing isn't necessarily the other, right? Again, I think that's one of the things you have to really consider out there. So anyway, so what do you think about this? What do you think about by 2028, Anthropic will break even, where on projections, OpenAI will still be burning $74 billion a year? What do you think about this? Is Sam Altman's idea to go big, bad, big, fast, whatever else, just throwing as much money as he can at the problem? Do you think that is the recipe for success? Or a company like Anthropic going a little bit slower, focusing things like on enterprise and corporate customers, actually trying to get that revenue and that profit margin? Do you think that makes more sense? What happens? What happens if OpenAI goes boom? What happens? Again, it's like, yay, ha ha ha, and then you realize you're about to get hit by the tsunami. Right? Right? It's like, it would be like if you're on an island. If you're on an island, and let's say you had all these rich people. So you had this beautiful beach. You had this beautiful public beach on the island, right? And these rich people come in and they bribe the politicians in order to sell that beachfront property. And then they create their mansions on the beachfront property. And then they don't allow any of the locals to be on the beachfront property anymore. Right? And so you see this big ass tsunami wave coming in, right? And as you're sitting there and you're watching, the tsunami wave just fucking destroys the mansions, destroys this just rich, gentrifying, pieces of shit. And you're like, yay! And then you realize that the wave keeps coming. The wave keeps coming. And you're like, oh, I'm about to die too. I'm about to die too. Do you feel like the disaster of OpenAI might be a little bit like that tsunami wave, where we all clap like, oh, ha, 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 Sam Altman got his comeuppance, as our society burns to the fucking ground? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a dumbass. Just be a real Lutnick and put a strong American comment down below. If you like these videos, no, I already said that. Oh, that's tired. That's a long day. Anyways, been doing this class, this AI and web scraping class. Been dealing with encoding for text. Text encoding is a pain in the ass. Anyways, what was I saying? Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. What I actually care about. Free D&Ds or hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is that you want to do. In Durham, North Carolina, we have a class coming up on AI and web scraping next week. We have a class coming up on extending AI capabilities using REST APIs. A couple weeks after that, we have more and more classes coming up. If you're interested, go to silicondojo.com to see what the schedule is. Do you remember free D&Ds is not free? That is why I shake my brain nips every day. If you want to support the project, there is a donor box link down below. And with that, see y'all later.